Alright, so today I want to talk about load order. Load order in Skyrim is pretty much the most important part of modding, especially once you get bigger lists, but just in general, if your order's wrong, that's where, I don't know, 90% of the issues are going to end up. Most of the issues you see on Reddit, Nexus, wherever, is a lot of times just an issue with load order. Sometimes it just can be some mods just don't work together, but most of the time it's a ordering issue. And one of the hardest things to explain is what should go where. And especially when your list grows and grows and grows, how do you tell what can go where or what should go where and all that. So I was trying to think of how to kind of make a intro guide to manual load ordering. I'll talk about loot at the end and why I don't use it, but I'll leave that to the end. So the main thing with load order is understanding how the file system works with Skyrim, how it uses the file types, when they load, and how they load. So you have two basic main mod types. You have plugin mods and non-plugin mods. So any mod, all your mods are going to be listed when you're using Mod Organizer 2. All your mods are listed here on the left. This is your mods pane. On your right here, you have a bunch of tabs. When you go to your plugins, this is going to be your plugins pane. Now, a mod can have a plugin, but doesn't have to. Plugins are just what the game uses. Uh, there's records in here, and I'll get into Xedit in a little bit. But the records tell the game what to do with a mod. Now, some mods are simply textures or mesh replacers, so they don't actually have a plugin. So if it's a straight replacer that uses the same exact path as an existing mod or just vanilla, it's not going to have any plugin. It's just going to be a texture folder or a mesh folder. But anything with a plugin, you're going to see an ESP, ESM, or ESL file in there. And now understanding the different types of plugins is also important because that determines they where they're going to be ordered. So we'll start off with your basic ESP. ESP is the main plugin format. ESP will load wherever you put it in your plugins list. The next one is an ESM. ESMs are master files, so an ESM will always be loaded before an ESP. So even if you tried to put an ESM lower down here, which when it's already there, it won't even let you, but say you install a mod with an ESM, it might be at the bottom, but it actually gets loaded up here. If you just drag that ESM up one in your plugins pane, it'll automatically shoot all the way to the top because ESMs are always loaded before ESPs, and that doesn't matter where you put it over here on your mods pane. You can move it wherever you want. Um, the ESM is always going to be loaded first, ESP second. So now there's a new type of mod called an ESL, or they call them ESPFE mods. Basically, they're an ESP. Well, these ones are ESPs with an ESL flag. And what ESLs are is it was a update added from the Creation Club is a new type of flag they can put that doesn't get loaded in the same space as ESPs. So with ESPs, you have a limit of 255. Once you go over that limit, the game will automatically crash. So they came up with these ESL flagged ESPs that don't count towards that limit. I think there's still a limit on these, but it's something crazy like 4,000 or something like that. Skyrim VR never got updated to get any of the Creation Club updates, so they technically don't support ESLs. I think the flagged ESPs do work, um, but I'll show you how to unflag them because it's just safer to do that for Skyrim VR specifically. Um, and then the last thing to talk about with file types that's very important to load order is BSA files. So BSA files are basically Skyrim's form of a zip file. It's a compression. The Creation Club uses it in most of the games. Now with Fallout, it actually makes a huge difference using BSA versus not using BSA files. In Skyrim, not so much in terms of performance. BSA seems to load a little quicker, but overall it's, especially if you have a solid state drive, you have all this on, it's not going to make much of a difference. So the issue with BSA files is that they load before loose files. So say you have two files or two mods that touch the same file. One's in loose format, so it's just a basic texture mesh folder. And then one, so you have your texture mesh folder, and then another one is in a BSA. Well, no matter where you put the ordering, it's going to load the BSA first and the loose second. So that makes it really difficult to kind of troubleshoot things when you have a lot of files with BSAs in them. I tend to extract most of my BSAs unless I know it's not going to conflict with anything or I know I want it to load first. So a lot of these content mods have BSAs. You can get a program on the Nexus. I'll show you in a minute here, but and you can extract them. So it's called BSA browser, but so when you double click on it, it'll go in and it'll show you all the file contents. So you can just go extract folders and then make sure it's going back into that same folder where the mod is. You can go ahead and extract it. And we'll do the other one. Extract. And then once you do that, you can go ahead and delete them. One downside is it is going to take more space. The BSAs do compress the files a little bit, much like a zip file. But another thing is once you extract them, if you refresh this, if there's any conflicting files, they'll show up here as your plus or minus in Mod Organizer. This didn't have any. Which one did I just do? Forgot which file it was just in. Oh, Skyrim Underground. So yeah, that one didn't have any conflicting files even after I extracted it, so I could leave that as the BSA if I want. It doesn't really matter. Just saves some space. But as you're building your list, you got to be very aware of the BSA files. Most texture mods that you'll get off the Nexus are just going to be mesh textures. All these little replacers that you'll download, they're not going to have BSA files usually. It's especially important when you're dealing with NPC overhauls, making sure everything's loose format, just so you can resolve conflicts. Because when you have the BSA, like I mentioned, it doesn't show up here in your conflicts, so you won't even know there's a conflict. And it's hard to tell what loads when you're dealing with two different file types. You can go here to your archives, and this will list all the mods in your load order that have a BSA file. So it's kind of a nice little tab here in case you're curious and you want to kind of check which mods have the BSAs, because you might have a conflict somewhere and you didn't know about it, and it actually is inside the BSA file. Yeah, so that's yeah, BSAs will kill you. I mean, that's one of the main things that really screws people over is when they're trying to resolve load ordering conflicts is these BSA files. You can get BSA browser on Nexus. So there's a couple different ones of these BSA tools, but this is my favorite one because it adds the little options. You can directly go into it and extract the folders. So I'd highly recommend using that. All right, so once you kind of understand the different file types, the ESM, the ESP, the fact that you have a mods pane, a plugins pane, BSAs load before loose, ESMs load before ESPs. Um, the next thing is how do you build your list? So kind of my philosophy and how I do my list is I usually start off with, and this doesn't really matter too much, but I usually start off with mods that are just script extender mods. So like SkyUI and stuff. If you look at these mods, well, this one does have an ESP, so I guess that's not a good example. But J containers, for example, this one is just an SKSE mod, just has a basic plugin and some scripts, and it has no conflicts with anything. So these mods can really go anywhere. When you're looking at new mods, when you download them, if they have no conflicts, if they have no um, plugin file, where they go in your order makes no difference at all because it doesn't conflict with anything. It doesn't have anything else. Um, so it doesn't matter where it goes. That's one thing some people get confused about. Think everything has to go in a specific spot. There's a lot of mods that it really doesn't matter. But then again, there's a lot of mods it really does matter. So you kind of just have to understand that. Looking at Mod Organizer 2, it's got the nice little arrows here saying this has files that are overwritten, and then or the plus that's saying it overwrites other files. And when you click on it, it'll light up whatever mod that it's talking about. So I kind of start with those kind of mods. So I got like the perk extender, SSC fixes, FISs here, these kind of mods. And then I just kind of work my way down. I do audio usually next. I'll do big quest mods. So one thing I want to mention is you want to kind of keep your ordering on both sides the same. Uh, it doesn't have to be 100%, but so if I have Skyrim Underground on this side and Forgotten Dungeons on this side, I want them in that same order on both sides. There's some rare exceptions where you don't have to do that, and I actually have that in my guide for like my lighting overhauls. But in most cases, you want this order to match this order. So as you're building it, and you'll start seeing some of your plugins, you might have to move some things around. Um, but for the most part, you just kind of go down the list here and you can see I got, like, for example, RS Children is a lot farther down, but most of these are in the order um, on both sides, with some exceptions that I had to move stuff around. And then I'll show you in Xedit kind of how to determine that. But it's good practice to kind of keep that in order. In terms of mods, though, I usually yeah, the uh, SKSE mods, and then sound, big, uh, quest add-ons. And then I go through a lot of my world textures. These are all world textures. Most of the stuff from my guide. World textures. And then armor, retextures, this is a lot of just the guide stuff. Then all my added NPCs. Going down further, more added NPCs, and then I get into my NPC overhauls, Botox and all that. And then my animations, skeletons, and then more textures. And then I just miscellaneous stuff as I get farther down, like combat overhauls and everything else. There's not really a set way you have to do that. But as I've over the year building the list and kind of seeing how it ordered this way, that's kind of how I started building my list over here, just so it was easier to match these up. All right, so once you start building your list, you're getting your order pretty good. And you want to know, how do you tell what should go where? Really the best way to do it is in Xedit. So I'll do some examples. So, well, first example, say you're going to add a mod that's just a texture. So say I was adding this Blended Roads Redone mod. Well, looking at it and click here, it tells me the mods that this will overwrite. Blended Roads, all these are ones that are, these textures are getting overwritten. Well, that's what I want. So I could technically just leave this down here. Just for making it neat, I like to kind of put it below the last one that it overwrites. So I have such a big list that this kind of becomes kind of a pain. But so Blended Roads is 161, so I'd probably put this one as 162. And then go up and look at that and make sure that's the spot I want it. So I can look, and yeah, it's still overwriting everything. So that's where I'd put that one. But coming down here, so say it's a mod, so we're going to go with this follower mod. So I download this follower mod. Well, where do I put it? I have no idea what records it touches, if it conflicts with anything. How do you know? So the only way to really know is using Xedit. So you go ahead and run it. And click OK. The new version of Xedit, as long as you're at like past 4, it loads pretty quick. The older versions took a while, especially with a huge list like mine. If you get another one, just hit OK again. So once that's all done, it'll load up. So I can go down here. Now, when you look at a mod's records, you open it up, and it's got all the records. Now, there's an easy way to tell if anything conflicts. All you got to do is, you can really click anywhere, but you want to do Apply Filter to show conflicts. And that'll basically run a filter through Xedit that'll remove all the records that aren't conflicted. So if I'm looking at these, anything in white has 0 conflicts at all. So nothing in the mod conflicts. So I already ran that, because if you have a big list, this takes a while. So I already ran it in another one, so I'll show you real quick. So once it's done, you'll get something like this. And this is showing all the conflicts. So we'll go back to our mod here. And you can see there's a conflict in the cell record on the rift in. So this is probably just the location of where that person, where the mod creator put that NPC. So if we click on this, and you go all the way to the right here, so these are all mods that touch that specific cell record. Now this is kind of where it gets to, you kind of just have to learn this over time, what these records actually do. But a basic top cell record has all your lighting information. So if I'm looking here, the main conflict it has is with my lighting overhaul with this cell record. Now you always want your lighting overhaul to win conflicts. So in this instance, as long as this mod is somewhere above ELE in my overall load order, it's fine. Because that means ELE will use the proper record. If you want to look here at the cell record, how the cell record works is you have a base cell record and then you have subrecords underneath that actually place objects or NPCs in this case. So just because ELE wins the record here, the NPC is still going to be placed fine because it's placed in a non-conflicting spot, as you can see with it being white here. So really the only thing you're concerned about is you want ELE to be the lighting source here. So yeah, as long as that mod is before ELE, then you're perfectly fine. For me, I like to keep all my NPCs kind of in the same, or all my followers kind of in the same spot. So I'd move this one up a little bit with my other ones. But that's how you would tell specifically what would conflict and what would cause any issues with that. So if I just left her at the bottom, then if you went to that cell spot that she's located in, it would use vanilla lighting because I have it below my lighting mod. And that would be the conflict with that. So we can then we'll look at another mod that has more of a solid conflict, I guess you could say. So this is a new Serana mod. We'll just go through real quick. Now I already have mods, several mods actually, that change Serana. So we'll go back. We have this activated at the end now. And we will go in and look at, so with NPCs, the main thing is making sure whichever NPC you want to be shown loads last. It seems simple, but as mentioned before with BSAs and everything, it can be a little confusing. And then some mods change the NPC record, even though it's not even an NPC overhaul mod. It's just that mod just happens to mess with NPC records. But so the most important thing for NPC records is the non-player character record here. So you click on this and you click on Serana. So you can see I have all these mods that touch her record. So basically to get her appearance, this is where all the head parts, this is where all her appearance stuff is located. This information has to be the last record. So if I wanted this Pandorable Serana to show up, I just have to make sure mainly that she's after this, but since I have a patch, she'd have to be repatched in. I'd have to make a new patch for her in here, which is a pretty simple process. I mean, it's really just dragging this from here to here. So all the information that's in the last, in the NPC appearance part is the last record. When you're looking at Xedit, it's always everything to the very right. The very right is going to be what's loaded. And really that's all you have to do. As you go through, you get new mods, you load them up. You're going to do your apply filter to show conflicts, get all the conflicts, and then kind of just look. And it's really just over time you get to know what all these records do. I kind of just figured most of them out I tried to find good videos, but there's not a whole lot of them. There's a couple where some guys are just messing with some stuff in Xedit that helped a little bit. Um, but yeah, over time, you just kind of learn what all these do, and you can manipulate them and do all kinds of fun stuff in Xedit. So we'll do another example. Um, let's see, what can we do? Let's do. I'm actually not going to use her, so she can go. All right, Deadly Combat. That's a good one, because that was one I used to use. I don't use anymore. But this one conflicts with a whole bunch of mods that I have. So, oh, and when you're looking on here, if you see this, that means it has a BSA file. So that's another way you can tell if they have BSA files, is they'll have that little chest on there, chest icon. Oh, and I'll show you also how to remove this flag when we open this up. So let's go ahead and open up Xedit again. Okay. So I'll load. All right. So real quick, so this one was a ESL flagged ESP. So all you have to do with these is click on the mod here, and up here on record flags it says ESL. Click edit. When this comes up, hit yes, untick ESL, and that's it. Nice and simple. And now it's back to a normal ESP mod. So anyway, we're going here to Deadly Combat. So this one's going to have a bunch of conflicts. Actually, with the main ones, oh, I'm thinking of the other mod. So this actually isn't going to have much. Yeah. All right. So we have a couple conflicts here. Guess this wasn't the best example. Let's go up to my other combat mods and I'll show you a couple examples. Because you're going to have some that'll have a bunch of conflicts, and where you put it just kind of depends on your preference. All right, so I have these going right now. So if I look here and go to my movement type, I have a bunch of mods that affect the NPC. Well, it's also the player movement doing specific things. Now, which values I want is depending on just my personal preference. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to know what the record does. Um, these are all combat styles for a lot of different, most NPC types in the game, and again, it's kind of one of those personal preference things. And if you really don't know what they do, it's kind of hard to figure out what you'd want where. And that's kind of where you follow guides and other people's advice until you get more comfortable with the records and knowing what each one does and kind of what your preference is. For me, it's just after testing different ones, which one I felt better in game personally, and that's which one that I put at the end, and that's which wins the conflict. Um, I mean, a lot of this is going to end up being personal preference. And speaking of personal preference, that's where I kind of wanted to go off and talk about loot. So loot, everyone talks about loot, the greatest thing ever, automatically loads your order, everything's perfect. Well, that's kind of what people pitch it as, and it's also what causes majority of issues that you see posted on Reddit and Nexus and stuff, is people just say use loot and everything's fine and dandy. Um, it's usually not the it's usually one of the worst advice you can tell somebody, just use loot. But I mean, it really depends. If you have no clue what you're doing, completely oblivious, loot's not bad, and it works for basic orders, basic load orders where you don't have a ton of mods. It's usually fine, but as even the author says, loot is intended to make using mods easier, and mod users should still possess a working knowledge of mod load ordering. And that's the main thing that most people don't say is they just say rely on loot and nothing else, and then people don't have any clue what they're doing, and you get issues, and it's a lot of times just simple ordering. Um, so there's a couple reasons I don't use loot. One is the bigger your list gets, the less useful it is. Loot has a nice thing where you can put rules in for specific mods, so they'll always be where you want them. But what I found is the bigger your list gets, the more rules you'll need, the less useful loot is, till you get to the point where why am I even using loot where I can just order it myself, and that's where I end up getting after a while. I was putting in so many rules, I was like, this is kind of stupid. I'll just order it myself, and that's what I do. So another issue with loot is it doesn't really account for personal preference. It's got a database of where it's supposed to put things, but say you have 4 mods that affect an NPC and your preference is, mod C, well, just the database might say that mod A should load last, so it puts mod A last when you wanted C, and it's just that kind of thing where it's just a basic database. It doesn't know what your preference is. Another thing is it doesn't know how to handle custom changes without manually going in there and setting rules again. So if you have mods that are specifically edited, so like my list on my website has tons of custom edits. I edited the ESPs and I need them in specific spots for them to work properly. If you use loot to move them around, that screws everything up, and then your whole list is screwed up, and then maybe you'll have, a bunch of mods that are overriding your lighting records here, and so all your lighting's messed up, or your weather is getting overwritten by something, and just stuff like that. There's no way to tell loot that without manually putting in rules, and again, once you know how to manually put in rules, you don't really need loot. So loot's one of those things. I just really would only recommend it to somebody that's doing a small list, has no clue, doesn't really want to learn, get into modding too much. And for that, it's fine. I mean, if you're just doing some popular mods, you have a small list at 30, 50 mods, something like that. Um, Loot's okay, but assuming you're watching this guide, I assume you're more interested in getting a little more into modding. And so I just wanted to do kind of a basic understanding of where things should go. So yeah, that's basically all I want to talk about in the video. Just main key points is understanding the different file types, understanding what loads before what, no matter what order it's in, i.e. ESMs. And ESPs can be flagged ESMs. That's another thing to keep in mind. So if you look at Mod Organizer 2, the white, kind of whitish italic font is ESM files. Well, you see some of these are ESPs. So you can actually do the same thing that I did with the ESL file, and you can flag a mod an ESM, a master file, and so that'll make it so it automatically loads before all the ESPs, and it's done the same way. You just come in, edit, and you add the ESM flag, and now it's going to be flagged an ESM file. And then that file, I'll show you here, we'll save it. So we'll come down here, and now you can see that we're going to have to refresh it. So we just edited it. But now you can see it changed to that white italic font. That means it's an ESM, and now kind of like I mentioned before, if I move this, it's automatically going to go to the top. So we move it like there and it disappears. And if you go up here, you can see it puts it up here with the other ESM files. So that's one thing with the flagged ESPs, just if it's up here with that font, that means it's an ESM file. So you have to keep in mind ESM, ESP, BSA versus loose. Those are the biggest things when you're dealing with order and making sure everything's where it's supposed to be. And then just kind of knowing records over time where what things do what, and that's how you determine at the end where you want things. Yeah, that's all I want to talk about. Hopefully, this was helpful. See you in the next one.